Certainly, and that's where I was headed, was the totalitarian liberalism. Once you say Keynes, then you have to point out that the father of Keynes is Malthus. In other words, Keynes is somebody who comes on the scene saying, I am an economist in the tradition of Malthus. And once you've said Malthus, you've also said Darwin. And by that I mean the ugly side of Darwin, which is the main side. That Darwin, when you think about social Darwinism, right, the survival of the fittest and the struggle for survival in society, that has always been the most brutal reactionaries who come forward with that. You could even make an argument that Hitler and Mussolini are unthinkable without Darwin. So today, because of the factional situation inside the U.S., you have left liberals coming forward saying Darwin is our man. Darwin is a charlatan. Darwin, especially what I'm referring to, is the blind watchmaker side of Darwin, the insistence that everything in the universe is purely by chance. I don't think it is.
And that's a way to neutralize our political will. They always say, oh, it's just neurons. There are no morals. But then the establishment has its own dark, bloody, culling morals of the destruction economy, right. Bulldoze cities instead of build starships to Alpha Centauris.
Exactly. And I think that is it's the ultimate appeal to irrationality, is to say total predestination. In other words, everything you do is fated and predetermined. Well, that's
it's a control freak religion to overturn the entire system and just hoggedly kill everybody, because that means you win as you sit on a pile of skulls.
And that would be Al Gore, I guess. Al Gore and these theoreticians of global warming, which is a hoax, a fraud, and it's transparent. Again, as a historian, I can tell. I don't need climatologists. They're charlatans when it comes to this stuff. The current variations of temperature are well within the observed historical range. If we go from the medieval warm period, about 1100, when you had various kinds of grapes and vines growing in Newfoundland and even in Iceland and Norway, you have wine culture going on in the North Atlantic. That's a whole lot warmer than what we have now. And then you've got this little ice age around 1600, 1650, maybe up to 1700, when the northern European ports were blocked with ice. Huge icebergs came floating down.
Yeah, but let's go back 9,000 years to the beginning of the Bronze Age, when it was even hotter.
Precisely. So I think we're well within the historically observed range, and you can even you can go into the CO2. The German chemists of the 19th century had records about that too, and we're well within those parameters as well. What they're expressing is the class consciousness of the Anglo-American banking elite. Very interesting observation. Any prediction of the end of the world has a definite class content. In other words, if somebody's saying the world is going to end in such and such a way, you look at that reflects interests. It reflects interests of groups, of classes of people, like oligarchs, bankers, and so forth. And that's Gore. Gore is obviously, his ego ideal is Prince Charles. He's very much under the influence of Prince Philip. He thinks that he's an American aristocrat. He'd like to join the titled nobility and feudal oligarchy of Europe. And their basic idea has always been that the world is overpopulated. Nothing new. The argument that they had for the Trojan War, 1000 BC, the principal oligarchical centers, like the cult of Apollo at Delphi, were saying the reason we have to have the Trojan War is that the world is overpopulated. There are too many people pressing down on the breast of Mother Earth. So nothing is new. The oligarchs thought that the world was overpopulated in the year 1000 BC, and now 3,000 years later they're coming with the same idiotic nonsense.
But it's not idiotic if they're going to control resources as a tool of tyranny. They don't believe this stuff. They cynically know it's a way to control people. That's why they'll go ahead and do all the other dangerous things they are doing environmentally.
You'd have to look at individual cases. Gore, it seems to me, probably does believe this stuff. I don't know.
Oh, really? Even though he owns the main carpet credit company?
I discovered that Gore was the owner of Love Canal. In other words, Gore had a share in this worst toxic waste site of the 1970s, Love Canal. So, yes.
He's the majority owner of Occidental Petroleum.
Yeah, so they have doublethink. I suppose you can call this doublethink. In other words, oligarchs have always hated technology, they hate science, they hate progress, and they've got to find a way that defines the rest of humanity as somehow bestial and inferior to them. Because the oligarch's problem is always, why should you be an oligarch? Why should you rule and not somebody else that's smarter, more moral, more honest, and just generally more desirable than you. So they've got to say, well, we're the oligarchs. Pelosi summed this up once. People camped out in front of her house during the Iraq War, and she said, we are leaders, you are mere advocates. You're only agitating for this or that idea. We take the responsibility of ruling. So we have a bankrupt ruling class. I think this is important. It also gets into this question of what did they know. If you look at the endowments of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and MIT, they have lost between 1/4 and 1/3. The Harvard case is something that's going to be in the news now. At the end of the month, June 30th, coming up now, we will know the losses of the Harvard endowment, which is the largest one. It's going to be 25%, 30%, might be 35%. How did they lose all the money? When Larry Summers, who is now running the economic policy for Obama, when Larry Summers, the woman hater, remember him, right? Women can't do science. Larry Summers, president of Harvard, said to the people managing the endowment, put the endowment into derivatives. And naturally, when that blew up, there were the losses. Now, the question is, did Larry Summers, as an oligarch and a financier, know what he was doing? I would say he didn't. He wouldn't have put all the Harvard endowment into derivatives if he had actually realized that the bubble was coming down. I think it's the problem of the oligarchy is they believe the world is overpopulated, they hate technology, and they love bubbles. Every time there's an economic bubble, they run. It's like a heroin addiction. They can't help themselves. And everything else they do is subordinated to this idea that we've got to have bubble. We've got to have a bubble economy. We've got to have globalization. And this is just the most recent form of things, going back to the
what
South
do you see
Sea bubble,
happening? Because we're going to come
bubble.
back and we're going to come back and go to calls, Webster. I got to stop you. How do you see this unfolding, though? I mean, if things aren't going well for them, but they've still got the force of their mass moving them forward, grinding over us, how does this all end?
Well, the situation of the U.S. is desperate, right? And we've got thermodynamic breakdown going on. If you look at this crash on the Washington subway line, right, 9 dead on the subway that I take, many days a week. That's scary. In the same area, right? This should be the area where they keep everything nice for the imperialist bureaucrats, right? In southern Maryland, they've had 2 big water main breaks. So we're approaching the point of physical breakdown. And that's got to be addressed. Somebody's got to come out and say, we've got to rebuild everything. Marshall Plan for the United States. Rebuild
but the bankers don't care.
Rail.
They want to destroy cities with bulldozers, and they're all going to live in palaces offshore.
So we fight them. What can we do? We got to fight.
We're going to take calls. Then we're going to get into the stage terror and the economy later. Stay with me, Webster.